Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the A16 webinar today. And this is on volunteer leadership. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Lan Tim Chung, A16 Global Leadership Team Coordinator, and I will be your moderator for the session today. Our speaker today is our past district governor, Lan David Mills. Hi, David, how are you?
I'm great, Lion Tim. How are you?
Very good. The Lion David has been a Lion for 40 years, and he served as our district governor for 2016 to 2017, and he is also now serving as our multiple district A council secretary. One thing I want to share with you before we get started is that I admired Lion David. He really shows a very high level of curiosity of learning new things. Well, in our A16, we never have delivered webinar training before. But because of COVID, then we decided to explore some new ways of delivering training. So webinar is one way we look at. And he volunteered himself to learn together on how to manage webinars. Well, he was one of our earliest moderator for our first webinar a few weeks ago. And now here we are. He is going to be our speaker for today. So thank you, Lion David, for joining us this afternoon.
No problem. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah. Now, just so you know, this webinar is recorded, and we will be posting the link to the recording on our A16 website in a couple of days. Give us a few days for our webmaster to put it on. And during the webinar, you can type in your questions or comments through the question box or the chat box. And you can try to raise your hand. And we will try to acknowledge you as much as possible. But just in case, if we are not able to get back to you on your questions or comments during the session, we try to get back to you via email afterwards. So at this point in time, I'd like to see if we can get connected with you with a poll. I'm going to launch a poll to ask you which region in A16 do you belong to? So if you can take your time to respond to it. I'm seeing some of the responses are coming in now. I see that we have participants coming in from region 18, 33, 52, and even outside of A16. Very good. Okay, I can see most of the polls are coming in now, so I'll close the poll now. Now you can see that we have about 40% of the participants coming in from region 18, 20% from 33, 13% from 52, and 27 from outside of A16. So welcome to the Lions from joining us from outside of A16. So at this point in time, I'd like to invite our district governor, Debbie, to say a few words.
First of all, I just want to say to all of you, thank you for attending today's session. And I'm really thrilled that we can continue our leadership series in spite of physical distancing. And I'm really happy that you're on the seminar and you're not out in the park like those people in Toronto who are going to keep us locked down longer. I want to applaud our GLT coordinator, past council chair Tim Chung and his team, especially David Mills today, for both taking on this training of making it interesting and available to you Lions online. And I want to thank each of you for taking the time out of this sunny Sunday to allow us to engage with you and to develop your leadership skills. Please stay safe and take care of each other and enjoy your seminar. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Governor Debbie. So that will take us into the subject matter for this afternoon session on volunteer leadership. So I'll pass the mic over to our past district governor, David Mills. David, take it away.
Thanks, Lion Tim. Well, first of all, everybody should know that I'm a little hoarse because I was outside working on a deck, and we're infested with black flies up here. and I think I must have eaten about 2 pounds of them. But anyway, we'll forge ahead. So this course is really designed to be interactive with lots of small group discussion. And it's actually designed to take place over a 3-hour time period. So what we've done is we've compressed it into about 1 hour, and hopefully to leave lots of time for questions and comments from you. So please don't be afraid to raise your hand if you need to. So we hope to cover the essentials and give you lots to think about. I want to tell you that you will probably need a few pieces of scrap paper handy to do some of the exercises. Normally, if we were together, we would have paper already for you. So if you could have that handy, it doesn't have to be fancy, that'd be really great. So we've all experienced different leadership styles, and some we've appreciated, and some, like in the cartoon you see on the screen right now, some we have not. So leadership styles are often determined by the scenario we're in at the moment. For instance, COVID has affected everyone and has really put us into a unique situation. So we are now actually pioneers in developing leadership techniques that we previously probably have not even thought of using. And leadership styles are also often determined by what has influenced us in our careers. So today we're going to take a quick look at being a leader of volunteers. And here are the learning objectives we're going to look at today. First of all, to identify a leader, differences between a manager and a leader. And I want to take you to a story. When I was an elementary school principal way back when, and Eleanor I see is joining us, and she'll know how far back that was. There was an instance when they took the elementary school principals out of the teachers union. So for my career, I had been what I considered myself to be an educational leader, and they changed the role to be that of an educational manager. And it made a huge difference in the way I operated. So there are big differences between a manager and a leader. And the second one, we're going to understand the motivation of members. When I was starting to put this together, I asked my wife, Lion Betty, give me 2 things that were important to her as a volunteer. And she gave me 2 words: to be motivated and to be appreciated. And then we're going to take a look at leadership style. And we're going to try to help you assess your leadership style. And it's more complicated and more surprising than you think. I did a practice run with my wife, Lion Betty, yesterday. And when she found out what her leadership style was, she was really shocked and amazed. And then we're going to take a short look at evaluating the effectiveness of your meetings. We can't spend a whole lot of time doing this, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the role that people play in their meetings. So what is volunteer leadership? And I was searching around and I came up with this. And I'll let you read it. I'd like you to pay particular attention to the last part of that statement, that we lead other volunteers in service activities that will meet those needs. So we're going to launch a poll now. Here's the statement. Not everyone is born a leader, but everyone can become one. True or false? Please select one.
All right, I think we have most of the responses. And here are the 2 responses.
So most people believe that is a true statement, that everybody can become. Only 6 said it's a false statement. Interesting. So let's carry on. Are leaders born or made? And in reality, there are in fact 3 categories. The first one is those who are indeed born leaders. So put a scenario in your head and think of a group of children playing in the sandbox or playing in the schoolyard or else in the playground. Probably you can pick out the ones who have leadership qualities already. And we have many of our lions that we think are indeed born leaders. But we also have this category, those who simply aren't ever going to be very good leaders. Either they just don't want to do it, Perhaps they lack the skills required. Perhaps they lack the experience that they think they need. Or perhaps they just don't have the confidence enough to go ahead and do it. But I believe there is a third category. Somewhere in the middle is from where the vast majority of our leaders come. And this is where the real potential of becoming a leader will be found. So I have a couple of rules of thumb. Never force anyone into a position where the chances of success are minimal. And I think you also have to be aware of the eager beaver who always says, well, pick me, but they're really not up to the job. So, business manager versus volunteer leader. And this is where you're going to need that scrap piece of paper. So what characteristics generally apply to each? So let me explain the chart to you. Down the left-hand column, you can see the numbers 1 through 18. Second column says business manager. In the middle are some characteristics that apply to either managers or volunteer leaders. And of course, on your right-hand column, you can see volunteer leader. Take a moment on your scrap piece of paper and either write the words or pick the number that you think would apply to a volunteer leader. You can see already that business manager has an asterisk beside. A business manager usually directs his staff or her staff. And usually a business manager is appointed. So just take a minute, jot down those numbers. And if you have any questions about what any of them mean, don't be afraid to ask. This would have been about a 10 or 15 minute exercise, which you're going to be doing in about 3 minutes. I see Tom Gordon has his hand up.
Let me see if I can get Tom. Tom, I don't see you have audio connection, so I'm not able to unmute you here. But I would suggest if you can type in your comment or questions in the question box, and we try to get back to you.
And while you're doing this, I'm going to make this comment. There are no absolutes. You're probably going to see some of those that you think apply to each. For now, just concentrate on the volunteer leader. Just a couple of more minutes, and I think we can then forge ahead with the next chart. Tim, I think go ahead. So here on the average is what you would have selected. So you see that a volunteer leader recruits staff. A volunteer leader is elected. That the goals are often relationship goals and they focus on process. Quite often they're emotional and caring, and they get their power from the people because they are elected, of course, and they work with people. They're often very creative, empathetic, and their appointment is most often very temporary. And the next slide, I think, then makes the comparison even better.
And line David, we have a question from line Tom.
Yes?
Do you want to categorize these as attitudes or skills?
Well, I think they're probably more attitudes than skills. That would be my position too. And some of them are just facts. The fact that, you know, our volunteer leader is actually elected. And when I'm talking about volunteer leader, I'm really concentrating on volunteer leader in Lions. So there you can see the comparison. Whereas a business manager directs staff, our volunteer leader recruits staff. A business manager is appointed, whereas a volunteer leader is elected. And you can go down that list and see the comparison between the two. So the most important difference between managing business employees and leading volunteers is that club members have many choices. So things like inclusiveness and consensus building and active involvement are keys to success as a leader of volunteers. And so you as a leader need to maintain their interest in becoming members and being involved in activities or leadership roles. you want to develop support among the members for projects, member recruitment, and committee work. And I see, do we have another question from Tom?
There was a comment from Tom saying, yeah, I guess he agreed with your comments on the
Thank you.
categories.
So remember back when I talked to Betty and we said two things and she said to be motivated. So I think leaders need to be, what motivates people. You bring up the two comparisons. I always like to throw in cartoons just to add a little humor. And I really love the one on the right. So here's a question. Think back when you first became a member. Now, Tim mentioned earlier that I've been a Lion for 40 years. Actually, it was 46 years ago that I became a Lion. So I had to recall 46 years ago, what prompted me to become a Lion? Well, my little story is that there was a knock on my door one afternoon, and at the door was the real estate agent who had sold me my house. He says, David, what are you doing tonight? I said, well, nothing special. He says, well, come on out. We're going to form a Lions Club. And we actually formed the Uxbridge District Lions Club. Here's a Lions Motivation Survey. And down the left-hand side, you can see 13 benefits of being a Lion. My friends are members, interesting community activities, fellowship with others, prestige, a chance for personal growth, to give back to the community, leadership opportunities, can I make a difference in my community, and so on. And there's a spot for number 14, other, which I invite you to add to. So here again, on a piece of paper, you either write down the words or the number. What of those benefits encourage you to become a Lion in the first place? Now, as we do this, you're all probably going to have a different set of numbers, so there's no poll involved to see which are the most popular. I have to tell you, when I did this, I selected numbers 2, interested community activities. I was new to the community. 3, fellowship with others. Here again, I was new to the community. 6, give back to the community I was joining. And number 10, a chance to meet some new people. Those were my initial motivators, because when Jack said, we're going to start a Lions Club, I hadn't any idea what a Lions Club was all about. Not a clue. Does anybody want to offer anything in category 14, other benefits?
If you have any input, you can always type it in the question panel so that we can share it with the rest of the participants.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's go ahead. Let's launch another poll now. I have recognized other motivators to keep me involved in Lions. Is that a yes or a no? This is something that is in addition to those original ones. I see Suda has her hand up.
Suda, I don't see you have audio connection into the webinar, so I will have to ask you to type in any of your questions or comments through the question box.
So she 57% said yes, and 43% said no. Interesting. So when I did this exercise, I added 5, 7, 8, and 12. So I think as leaders, there are many motivators that help members remain engaged and be active participants. So we know that it's really easy to get members. It's even harder to retain members. And I think some of the things we miss are what motivates people to stay engaged and be active. So as leaders of volunteers, it's essential that we do our part in that engagement. And we also need to see how our leadership style impacts the process. So let's do a little exploration of leadership styles. And here again, as we do this next exercise, to remember that there are no absolutes, but you also need to have that scrap piece of paper in front of you. So Tim, next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. one slide I forgot. Here are our top 10 motivators before we go into leadership styles. Just put it up quickly, Tim, so they can see. There's first 5 and the second, and go right to the next slide because it explains them a little more. Think about it today. With social contacts and feeling part of the group and being actively engaged, given the fact that we can't meet physically, how hard that is now. I was talking to Tim about the fact that, we in Halliburton, we are doing all our club meetings online, and we have some people who haven't been able to join. Some of them live out in what we call the sticks and they still are on dial-up internet, so it's really difficult for them to do it. And when you get down to number 9, remember what Betty said? To be appreciated or rewarded. Very important. Okay, now Tim, let's go to the next slide. I had my notes mixed up, my apologies. So here's a leadership style assessment. So you notice that we have 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So on your piece of paper, jot down the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, just as if you were going to make columns. Okay. Now we're going to go across each row horizontally. I'm going to ask you to choose the one word that you think best represents your style and put a check mark or write the word under that column number. So, first column. Do you think your style is forceful, outgoing, diplomatic, or passive? Pick one. Even if you think 2 apply to you, you pick the one you think most applies to you. Let's do the second row down. Do you think your style is adventurous, generous, analytic, or patient? Number 3 line. Are you demanding, sociable, accurate, or calm? Next line, do you consider yourself competitive, trusting, systematic, or loyal? Here again, you can only pick one. Are you decisive, convincing, sensitive, or deliberate? How about, are you self-assured, enthusiastic, conscientious, or team-oriented? And now, are you daring, emotional, conventional, or stable? Now, once you've done that, add up the number of check marks in each column. Whether you like it or not, the highest number or 2 numbers indicates your usual leadership style. For instance, if you had the most check marks in column 1, you're like the director and like to assume authority. If you had the most check marks in column 2, you can consider yourself the motivator or the coach. If most of your check marks were in column 3, you're the thinker or analyst. And if most of your check marks are in column 4, you're the person who offers compliant support. So next slide, Tim. By the way, that's the one that really fooled Lion Betty. I won't tell you where she was, because then she'd kill me. So number 1 and 2 is probably best for a group of new committee members. So you can see that they'd be enthusiastic, they'd be outgoing, adventurous. If number 2 and 3 is probably the best characteristics for leading a volunteer group. And that's probably where we'd like to be. Number 3 and 1 would be the best for a money management position. You can see that. You can see that they'd be analytic and they're very accurate and systematic. And number 4, of course, 2, 3, and 4 would be the best for a team or committee member. So I don't know whether you're surprised at your leadership style, but you now have an indication of what that leadership style is. So you need to think about how this relates to motivation and leading volunteers and what adaptations or changes you would need to make. Another poll. Why do people quit Lions clubs? Is it because of unproductive meetings, personal reasons, membership issues, club culture, or lack of service? Pick one.
All right, I'm seeing the post response coming in.
So we see that 50% think it's meetings. Personal reasons got 13%. Membership issues, the lowest. Lack of service, 0%. Oh, and club culture, 31%. Good answers. Good
Yes.
answers. The number one reason why Lion members quit is unproductive meetings. And I think we can all relate sometimes to that cartoon. So let's take a few moments to evaluate your meetings. And you're probably aware there are many documents that LCI produces that can help you do that. But for every meeting, usually on the left-hand side, you can see agenda items that would appear on a meeting agenda. Officer reports, committee reports, new business might come up. There might be a proposed project and meeting program ideas, and quite often there's a meal that would be involved. But for every one of those agenda items, there is also a process. So reports might be an oral or printed summary. For new business, it would be presenting information. If somebody is proposing a budget, persuasive speech would be the process that people would use. Ideas would be, we just requesting ideas. And in a meal, of course, there would be some casual conversation. So as leaders, it's really important for us to try to get members more involved in the processes. So here are a few examples, and you could probably come up with more. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and offer some important input. For instance, you could ask questions, but what you really need to wait and make sure that you either get answers or more questions. I recall once when I was president of the Uxbridge Lions, it came time to talk about a project that we had done annually. And I said, could you raise your hand if you would be willing to serve in that committee or lead that committee to get the program going this year? I waited. Nobody raised their hand. I said, okay, then I guess I assume we are not going to be doing that project. 6 hands went up. So sometimes you have to be patient and guide them. Sometimes when people are doing their committee reports, it's important to give them some positive feedback, even give them a little applause for doing it. Sometimes you can ask for straw votes before proceeding with the project. You might want to say, raise your hand if you think it's a good idea and that we should go forward with it. For new ideas, a great idea is to hand out index cards to people at the beginning of the meeting or during the meeting. Ask them to write down a great idea they think that should be considered and hand it back in. What a valuable way to get some input from members. Perhaps you could pass a clipboard around as a sign-up sheet for a particular project. I remember at one club I was attending when I was district governor, and they were coming up with the same idea, and they said, we still need 3 people before we can get this program going. And no one's leaving this meeting until 3 people raise their hands, and 3 people raise their hands. And for dinner, try to mix up seating arrangements so that you get different conversations going about projects. So whenever you're looking at your club as a whole or looking at specific working groups or committees, I think it's valuable to recognize the various roles members might play. So let's take a look at some of them, and I'm sure you will identify members of your club who personify some of these. So let's go to the first group, Tim. So here you see we have the information or opinion seeker or giver. The clarifier, that's the person who usually listens, rephrases, and asks questions. You get the idea initiator and the elaborator. The introducer, who quite often will introduce new ideas. And the summarizer, of course, who's going to be bring us back to agenda. And the evaluator. And our next group, well, we recognize the harmonizer or the mediator. Now, he or she's person usually resolves difficulties. And the encourager, of course, really important, encouraging other members to participate. the gatekeeper is usually the one that tries to bring us back onto the topic. And then we have these guys. And you all know the blocker or the resistor. That's a person who refuses to do anything. And we probably recognize the aggressor. And that's the person who tries to gain status, usually by blaming somebody else or criticizing somebody else. The attention seeker, you get that. And the special pleading. The dominator, the person who never stops talking, sometimes like me. The supercritical. The withdrawing one is really interesting because I often think about the lion in the corner. You know, the person who doesn't do anything, the hand never goes up, they never say anything. And the confessional person, that's an interesting one. Often it happens that they're in a group situation and they have something not even related to the topic at hand, but they want to use those people that they are with and comfortable with as a sounding board. Now, does anybody like to offer any ideas of how to deal with these blocker resistors? And if we do the next click, Tim, you'll see that on the left-hand side are the very productive roles, and of course on the right-hand side are the non-productive roles. Click again, and you can see under predictive, those are task roles. So these are the people who assist the group to accomplish goals. Then we have the maintenance roles, and these help members feel satisfied and comfortable. And of course, the non-productive roles are very self-serving, and they may have a negative impact. And if anybody has some ideas of how they could deal with those people on that right-hand side, the ones that have a negative impact, any ideas you'd like to share with us right now, it would be really great. Just put your hand up or send us the question.
I do have a comment from Line Suda saying that one member joined our club just to have a name to run for elections.
So that's the person who was motivated probably by prestige.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So it's really important as leaders to decide how best to deal with members who play non-productive roles. And the best way to manage group discussions is to know a variety of roles people play and be prepared to deal with the non-productive roles so you can minimize discouragement of other members. And your role as leader is to maximize member motivation and participation. Okay, here's another poll. You cannot be a leader if you aren't in an authority position. True or false? Here's the next one.
Here are the results.
Okay. Okay. And I think there's a second question in that poll, Tim.
Yeah, and I will bring up the second one again.
You cannot be a leader if you are an introvert. True or false?
Okay, let's share the results of this poll.
100% said false. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think there's a third question.
That's right, that's the third one. Okay, and here comes the third question for everyone.
If everyone is a leader, there'll be no followers. True or false?
So we are getting a mixed response here. And okay, over 90% of responses came in. So, okay, I'll close it and I'll share the results to you.
No 100% there. 65 said false and 35% true. Okay. You cannot be a leader if you aren't in an authority position. Well, I believe that is false. If you're a leader, you don't have to be a manager as well. For instance, if you're setting examples, if you're guiding people, if you're being their voice whenever a situation arises, you're developing leadership skills. This is the job of a true leader, no matter what his or her daily job description is. Now think about the lion who is a manager in her day job, but becomes a volunteer leader at the club level. That leader certainly has to change their style depending on which situation they're in. You cannot be a leader if you're an introvert. I believe this also to be false. because sometimes thinking more on the inside than on the outside proves even more beneficial than we think. So character traits are so different in people, we simply cannot put a label on it. So introverts usually aren't masters of public speaking, but that doesn't mean they cannot guide and inspire people. Think about that lion in the corner again, who might be an introvert. There's leadership potential in that person. And the third one, if everyone is a leader, there would be no followers. I also believe this is a false statement, because nobody leads in everything, and the best leaders have their specialties. The best leaders step in and out of their roles as leaders gracefully. The art of recognition. So remember what Lion Betty said. She wanted to be motivated, and she also wanted to be appreciated. And people value being appreciated for their contributions. Recognition does not have to be elaborate, but it does have to be genuine. And leaders need to be constantly aware of this fact that volunteers need to feel that their contributions are appreciated. It can take the form of a simple thank you or a round of applause. And I want to direct you to a great document on the Lions Club's International website called The Art of Recognition. And there's the number. And as Lion Tom will tell you, sometimes it's easier not to go to the Lions Club International website, but to Google and say Lions, The Art of Recognition. And up it comes. And it's got a whole variety of ways in which you can recognize leaders and volunteers within your club. Simple and more complex. And of course, if you really want to get to be recognized, bring up the next part, Tim. We have all these fellowships that we can use to recognize people who've done an outstanding job. And quite often as a club, we might want to recognize volunteers who are not members of our particular Lions Club. For instance, I could tell you that the Halliburton and Ticket Lions Club have given 2 Melvin Jones fellowships to people who were not Lions. One was a person who served as a reeve of our community for years and years and years and was very supportive of our Lions Club all the time. And the other one was a person who had headed up our hospital foundation fundraising for over 20 years. And we gave her a Melvin Jones Fellowship too. That was especially pleasing to us because her husband's a Rotarian.
And now, David, over here, just a comment regarding the document, The Art of Recognition. We have posted this document on the A16 website. If you go to the A16 website, go to menu under GLT, you'll find this a copy of this document, The Art of Recognition, being posted there.
Yeah, it's a very, very valuable document. Okay. So in my research, I came upon a website that talked about the 6 pillars of leadership wisdom. And I thought I would conclude by sharing this with you. First of all, be confident. Showing confidence is often a thing of nonverbal communications, and it's written that more than half of human communication comes from nonverbal clues. And so I would say to be confident, even simple things like standing tall, making eye contact when you're talking with people, controlling fidgeting. I recall once somebody doing a talk and they had their hands clasped in front of them and they were twiddling their thumbs. I could not take my eyes off the twiddling thumbs, so I couldn't concentrate on what that person was saying. And I'm going to add something that I think is really important. Look the part. Be honest. Dishonest goes hand in hand with pretend leaders. I think we see in lots of examples now. Followers will look at your level of honesty and respond accordingly. And when you're honest and treat people just the way you expect to be treated back, you cultivate honesty and integrity. Each of your member of your team needs to line up with your core expectations. Think of what's been happening since the pandemic started. I'll put an example up with which you may or may not agree. I'm going to talk about Doug Ford. Think about Doug Ford's leadership style a year ago. and the leadership style that he's demonstrating now. The situation has made him change his leadership style, and he has to come out and be honest about what his intentions are and what his core expectations are, and he's verbalizing that all the time. Next, to inspire. So don't be afraid to open your eyes to novelty and innovation. And haven't we had to do that over these past few weeks and months? Know your vision and communicate it, because this really helps people to overcome difficult times. We are seeing this demonstrated over and over and over, and I've seen changes in leadership styles right before our very eyes. Interact. You need to work with and for members. It's far less about being the boss, or more about teaching and guiding. Be sincere and become familiar with your people's talents and also their limitations, and be open to new ideas from members. Be the change you wish to see. Lead by example. Set the right example for people to follow. And speaking of the change, embrace it. Know and accept it. Nothing is forever. Change brings with it opportunities and challenges more than it brings trouble. So be flexible, adaptable, and enjoy change when it comes. Be a volunteer leader. Thank you. So, in conclusion, I hope we've identified the differences between a manager and a leader. I think we've come to understand that motivation of members is really important. I hope you have a little better understanding of what your leadership style is and how you might have to adapt that style to different situations. And I hope that you're going to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of your meetings. And remember again, for that last point, there are several documents that LCI has, Your Club, Your Way, Blueprint for Effective Clubs, Club Quality Initiative. They're all there to help you do that. And I would suggest that you as a leader should take a look at those and employ them. So Tim, I think questions or comments from anybody? Looking forward to hearing some.
So,
Like talking.
We do receive a few comments regarding the motivation thing. Line Margaret was saying that the chance to have fun is also important.
Yes, excellent. Yep.
And on recognition, I also have a comment from Line Margaret Tucker. Again, recognition should be properly done at meetings.
Ah, yes. So Margaret, here, I'll ask you a question. If we can't do physical meetings, what do we do? First, as I know that Governor Debbie has awards she needs to hand out, and she's hanging on to them. How can she do that? So it's difficult. I think I saw on Facebook, Tim, from A16, someone was given a leadership award. So somehow he received that award virtually, or maybe it was delivered to him. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe they delivered that, or they present that award at a virtual meeting of the district.
Ah, there you go.
So that's another way that we have to look at embracing change. Given the circumstances nowadays, then we may not be able to have face-to-face meeting. So again, having a virtual meeting and have those items properly presented, properly introduced, even through the virtual meeting, I think that would give a lot of meaning to the recipients.
I agree. Well, as I said before, we're pioneers in finding innovative ways to get things done when we can't meet physically. So good for you.
Yeah. We also have a comment from line Tom Gordon. Recognition should come as soon after the event as possible. It was presented virtually, but delivered by mail.
Ah, okay. Thank you, John, for that.
And which is very true. A lot of time when we talk about recognizing volunteers, then we say that, oh, we will have to wait for the next occasion. But personally, I also believe that timing is very important. So for any recognition, it has to be timely.
And I love the way people are now posting these on social media so that the recognition goes beyond the club, it goes to the community as well.
And we have another comment from Aline Margaret Tucker. I meant that a good description of the reasons for the recognition should be read out so everyone knows why.
Excellent point.
I think that's a good point, right? Sometimes when we present anything, or even saying thank you for a lion for whatever good job that the person have done, then we should be able to articulate with some more detailed information about what this recognition is for and why are we saying thank you to the individual. So that I think it's not just to say thank you or to recognize that particular individual. I believe it's also a motivation to the rest of the club, to the rest of the participants, so that they know that these are positive actions or behaviors that we would like to see more. So again, it's a motivation to the others as well.
Okay. And I think in these times of social distancing, keeping contact with each other is so important. And if internet isn't working, then telephone calls are really important too. Any other comments or questions? Well, Tim, I want to thank you for all the work you did on editing the presentation and making sure it went smoothly. You're becoming an expert.
Oh yeah, we learned together on this one, right? Yeah. And so again, thank you very much for everyone joining us today. So as I mentioned before, this webinar has been recorded, and the link to the recording will be posted on the A16 website. Just give us a couple of days. And if you go into our website, click on menu and under GLT, then you will be able to see the link. And then you click on the, when you click on the link, you have to provide your email address before you can view it. And again, like any district events, we welcome your comments and feedback. And if you have any suggestion or recommendation so that we can even do better the next time, send me an email. Hey, so again, I want to thank everyone for spending time with us, and in specific, our speaker, Past District Governor David Mills, for putting together such an interesting presentation and a lot of information. And thank you very much. And everyone, stay safe and enjoy the rest of the day. Oh, by the way, we have another webinar coming up at 3:30 if you're interested. And if you haven't registered, you can still register now. So I'll see some of you in about half an hour. Thank you very much.
Thanks again, Tim.
Bye now.